Hello everyone, welcome to Know Your Rights with me, Ambika Hirunandani. I'll be bringing you this series in collaboration with my friends at Shebang for Good. In today's podcast, we'll be demystifying India's narcotic laws. Lately in the newspapers, we've been reading a lot about the NDPS Act, the NCB, and a lot of us aren't sure what this stands for, what these laws mean. Worst of all, if somebody is accused of an offense under these acts, they're really not sure what they're supposed to do next. So, in this podcast, we hope to answer some of these questions and demystify these regulations. So, Kushal, could you tell us a little bit about what is this NCB?
The NCB, I think now everybody is very much aware of the NCB, but the NCB is a central agency which works for eradication of narcotics, and it's under the NDPS Act. Like the NCB, every state also has its anti-narcotics department. So even Maharashtra, for that matter, has an ANC cell, which is attached to the Bombay Police. But the NCB is the Narcotics Control Bureau, which is under the Union government. It's a central agency.
So, could you tell us a little bit about what someone should do if the NCB shows up at their door? What next steps are they supposed to take?
Yes, surely, Ambika. First and foremost, people need to understand that the NCB can show up and search their house even without a warrant. I mean, I know in every movie and every series that we see, the first question asked is, do you have a warrant? Well, the Act, NDPS Act, specifically states that officers above a certain category need not have a warrant to search the house. So, they may search a house even without a warrant. Secondly, naturally, if they come to search your house, you need to cooperate fully with them because it is not a vexatious search. They are coming to search your house basis some information that they may have received. So you must cooperate with them fully. Third, you must ensure that whatever is being done in the house is done in front of two independent witnesses. That is what the law requires, that two independent witnesses who are not from the NCB, who are not from your household, maybe, your next door neighbor or anybody else are present there to witness the search. Thereafter, the NCP is required to, prepare a detailed report of the house search which is conducted at your house. You need to ensure that that report is truthful. It is exactly how things have happened. If they have found anything in your house, it is recorded properly in that manner. And thereafter, the witnesses will both sign on that search Panchnama, and the NCB requires to give you a copy of that Panchnama. So these are some of the things that you need to be aware of. The NCB may also carry something called a drug detection kit in case they find some narcotic substance to check what is that substance and whether the purity of that substance, etc. So these are some of the essential things that you need to be aware of. Last, there's one more thing, of course. If there is no warrant, NCB can carry out the search only between sunrise and sunset.
So, if the NCB was to show up at my house at 2 in the morning, then they couldn't come in and conduct a search.
Well, practically they would still come in and conduct the search. But whether that search will have any validity later on in terms of trial or, at the time of your bail, that search would be deemed illegal.
Also, so can the NCB or the police mandate that somebody who has been accused of a charge under the NDPS Act get tested for having consumed a particular substance, or can they not? Is that not legally permissible?
So, Ambika, first to answer that question, first is that consumption of any substance is a specific offense under the NDPS Act under 27. So, even if you're a consumer, it is an offense. If it's cocaine or heroin or morphine, it's punishable up to a year. If it is any of the other drugs, it's punishable up to 6 months imprisonment. Right now, take an example that there is a rave party and the NCB conducts a raid at a rave party. Naturally, the NCB is required to, test everybody, and they are empowered to test everybody. They are entitled to take your urine and blood sample to test for the presence of drugs in your system. So yes, that power is there, and the NCB can do it.
a lot of young people, they stay in colleges, they have to share rooms with people, young professionals, they have flatmates. If A and B stay together, A doesn't consume any narcotic substance, but B routinely does, has their friends over, has a bit of a party in which people are consuming substances. Does that mean, does that expose A to any sort of liability under the law? Is A vulnerable in any way?
Yes, I mean, Ambika, I think A should definitely find a new roommate or, get himself a new room because he may not have any liability from the law, but, we are aware that the law proceeds quite slowly in India. So, what will happen that maybe the NCB raids the room and finds some drugs or narcotic substances in that room and nobody there. So naturally, since the room is being shared by both A and B, they are bound to question and arrest naturally both of them. So by the time he proves that he's not a user, he's not a consumer, he had nothing to do with this entire thing, it may be too late in terms of reputation, in terms of his career, his college, and so on and so forth. So no, he's not really liable, but there are these other factors which get difficult to prove and it takes time.
It's just a dangerous sort of sticky situation to be in. So it's better to just, if somebody is young and they're in this situation, it's better to just sort of extricate themselves from the entire thing. Then also, Kushal, say for example, you mentioned somebody getting arrested. Now, say somebody was consuming a narcotic substance, they get arrested. How long will they be in jail for? When will they get bail? I mean, because the news reports of so many cases, they say somebody was in jail for 30 days, somebody was in jail for 40 days. So what can one expect if one is arrested consuming a narcotic substance?
Okay, so yes, I mean, I appeared for a lot of them, and there were different jail terms for each. See, the act has a chart actually. At the end of the act, there's a schedule, and the schedule gives two quantities. One is a small quantity, and one is a commercial quantity. And the object of the act states that if you're caught with a small quantity, the offense is bailable, right? Now, this is subject to the judgment of the Bombay High Court in Riya Chakrabarti, where the High Court has said that all offenses under NDPS Act are non-bailable, right? But still, the Act makes a difference between a consumer and a peddler.
Right.
That is the object of the Act. So, therefore, if you're caught with a small quantity, you are likely to get released on bail very, very soon. Even in a couple of days or 2-3 days.
Right.
If you are caught with something known as a commercial quantity, then you are looking at a really long time inside because then bail is difficult and there's a specific bar to giving bail under 37 of the NDPS Act. So therefore, that distinction is very important. I'll give you a small example.
Right.
Suppose you take a drug like cocaine. For cocaine, a small quantity would be 2 grams under the Act.
Right.
And a commercial quantity is 100 grams.
Right.
Right? So depending on what is seized from you or what quantity of drugs are seized from you,
Right.
your bail will depend a lot on that.
So also, what quantity, say, of marijuana would be considered a small quantity, and what would be considered a large sort of commercial quantity?
Marijuana, Ambika, small quantity is 1000 grams
Right.
and commercial quantity is 20 kilos.
Right. And what about the case of, say, ecstasy or MDMA?
Yes, I think both are defined separately if I recollect correctly. But MDMA, I know small quantity is 0.5 grams, whereas the commercial quantity is 10 grams.
Right. Right. So
So there are almost 200 substances which are defined in the schedule. A lot of them are medicines.
yeah, which was my next question. So a lot of medicines also sort of get covered by the act. So where does that leave somebody who is, say, taking an antidepressant which is prescribed perhaps by a medical practitioner?
I think we have all learned, and I know Indians love to self-medicate and things which are required to be prescribed are available across the counter. But I think now we have all learned that for whatever drug which is a Schedule H drug which requires a prescription, we must have a prescription. We must keep that prescription safely with us at all times, so that at, say for example, at time of a house search, if some medicines are found, you can immediately show that you have a prescription for the same. I think that's very, very important.
Could you tell us a little bit about what are India's narcotic laws?
So, Ambika, it's a pleasure to be here and to be speaking with you. But this is a very vast subject. We have an NDPS Act 1986, and it's in terms of an international convention known as the First Convention on Narcotic Drugs, 1961. So basically, India's laws are based on that. That's to put it in a nutshell.
What is a narcotic substance under the Act? Could you tell me a little bit about that?
There are number of narcotic substances. If we go in the general terrain, you would say LSD, opium, ganja. They're all narcotics and psychotropic substances. Now, there are three plants principally from which you get them. There is the opium, which comes from a tree, the poppy plant. There is coca, which gives cocaine. There is cannabis, which gives you hashish, which is what is most commonly consumed in India and which is a popular substance consumed even during, say, Holi or many festivals, or by many even sadhus, many religious people, many Sufi people. So some of these substances, even though they are put in heavy duty schedules, are actually very mild substances and probably harmless substances. And
Right.
some, when consumed out of proportion and without care, are going to be dangerous. So all have been clubbed in two schedules, being Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 of the NDPS Act. But it is a very, very strong enactment. The punishment is very severe. And that's what, when a common man consumes it, they often do not realize that, say, consuming something like cannabis is going to have such serious repercussions, which are disproportionate perhaps to the consumption of a substance which is not so dangerous, which is not harmful.
If you had to give an estimate of like how long a trial under this Act would last, what would be your estimate?
So, Ambika, the first thing we have to keep in mind is bails. Under this law are very, very difficult to get. The law almost makes a presumption of not granting bail, and these are enactments where the onerous aspect of the proof has been on the person who is caught. So, and bails are very difficult to procure, so you have to virtually say or bring in evidence to show that you are not guilty of the offense.
Right.
Now that's difficult with the state and prosecution loaded against you. Very often, the arrest is shown at a place where it didn't really happen because it suits the state or the prosecution or the police to show the arrest at one place. Now, the manner in which, because it's such a rigorous act, there were rigorous provisions brought in to ensure that there will be an opportunity of search if a person wants a senior officer to come in before they are searched, then so that there's no question of plantation. But all these rigors are being circumvented somehow or the other by prosecution. And I've known cases where people will be able to, through telephone records, show, or their phone records show, that the place of arrest was, say, not in Amritsar, was in Delhi, or
Right.
was in Amritsar and not in Delhi, or vice versa. So the fact is, but sometimes the police will take away your phones. They will switch off their own phones. So the question here is also, how do you prove your innocence? And that's what is the important aspect in a case where you may not get bails. So to answer your question, it can't be divorced from the fact that bails are difficult to get. That presumption of innocence of a person who is still under trial is very difficult in these cases, because it's a contrary to the law, even though in certain other cases like PMLA, which is prevention of money laundering, the Supreme Court has made pronouncements striking down certain provisions which are paramateria to the NDPS Act. But to answer, I made it a long answer, but to answer it, I would say about 4 to 5 years.
So, Kushal, what if somebody is caught consuming a narcotic substance? What should they do at that point of time? Say they're standing on the street and somebody is consuming a substance and the police sort of apprehend them, or say the police apprehend someone at a particular place and they say, hey, you've been consuming XYZ substance. What should the person do at that point of time?
Okay. So, Ambika, from what I understand, what you're saying is that what happens once a person is arrested, what are the things he should know or he should do?
Yeah.
Right? So, first of all, they should know some of their rights. Primary being that once you're arrested, you have a right to be informed. I mean, one of your family members or your friends have the right to be informed of your arrest. Right? And they also give you a phone call, and they also prepare something called an arrest memo where they will write down all the details as to why, when, where you were arrested. And all this is important later on, right? And who was informed of your arrest. So this is one of the most basic rights that is available, and that should be naturally enforced, because somebody needs to know that you have been taken in custody. The second thing is, once you're arrested, naturally the family should get in touch with a good lawyer, consult their family lawyer, or any other lawyers that they know, or a lawyer who specializes in, say, NDPS or NCB matters, and they should take advice. It's very, very important, and go as per the advice of their legal counsel. Third, the person arrested should now know that whatever statements, he cannot be forced to give any statement to the NCB, and whatever statements that he does give, it is now held by the Supreme Court, I think 2 to 3 weeks back, those statements cannot be used against him, which was not the case earlier. Earlier, under NDPS was a exception where your own statement could be used against you in a court of law.
Right.
So now the Supreme Court has said that they don't hold that evidentiary value since they are given to a police officer. But still, you should not be forced to give any statement. You should not be under any pressure to give any statement. These are I think some of the initial steps in that a person who's arrested needs to know.
Right. Also, lately we've been reading in the news about people's WhatsApp chats and their Snapchats and their SMSs. And so can somebody's sort of WhatsApp chats be used as evidence against them? And also, can somebody find a WhatsApp chat that has perhaps been deleted, or that's 2 years old or 3 years old? So, I mean, is it possible to even get that data? And secondly, can it be used as evidence against someone?
Right. I think now WhatsApp chats have become quite infamous, and I think we have all been party to reading a lot of chats of several people in the papers. So I think it's important. To answer your first question, yes, WhatsApp chats can definitely be used against you. They can definitely be used in investigation. Thereafter, they can be used to oppose your bail. Thereafter, they may be able to use them at trial. Of course, there are some technicalities in what circumstances you can use those WhatsApp chats, but I'll not get into that. The basic principle answer being yes, definitely your WhatsApp history can be used against you. And in fact, NDPS has a special provision which makes it even harder, where it says that electronic documents, which is what a WhatsApp is, the contents of the document are assumed to be true by the court. So,
Right.
yes, it forms a very formidable piece of evidence against you.
So can
Whether
it?
WhatsApp chats can be deleted, WhatsApp chats can be retrieved. I tell you frankly, even we were not sure, and we did so many of these matters. From experience, I say that it appears that only the chats which you may have stored somewhere, though you may have deleted from your phone, but if you have stored in an iCloud or say a G Drive, those the NCB is able to recover. Having said that, today's Times of India front page, one of the ex-inspectors of Bombay Police claims that he's able to retrieve deleted chats of even as far back as 5 years.
Right.
So, frankly, the jury is out on that. I mean, the technology has progressed a lot, so I don't say it's out of the question that they are able to retrieve deleted chats. But from all the experience that I have, it appears only the chats which are stored somewhere in some backup, those they are able to retrieve.
So also, Kushal, very quickly, say for example, A and B are talking to each other, right? And they're talking about maybe meeting somewhere and consuming a narcotic substance. And then they say, oh, C would also be joining them, and C is also going to be partaking in the consumption of the substance. Does that incriminate C also?
No, Ambika, it cannot incriminate C unless and until C himself. In fact, none of this entire conversation cannot incriminate either A, B, or C.
Right.
Uh, Take an example. I mean, I may on a WhatsApp chat to you say that, oh, Ambika, yesterday I was in Paris and I met Marilyn Monroe, or something like that. These are all imaginary uh, talks between friends, correct?
Right.
Similarly, A, B, and C could be having imaginary talks
Right.
unless and until there is something to show that A and B actually consume something, right? There is no way that this sentence or this conversation can incriminate them. Of
So,
course, what it
so,
can do is give, sorry, yes,
so in essence, a WhatsApp chat is not adequate evidence to incriminate someone, but it can be used as sort of part of the evidence, but perhaps it can't be the only piece of evidence.
absolutely. I mean, along with this chat, then they need to show that A and B actually met at some place and then actually smoked a joint, or, part, did some other drugs between them.
Right.
So that is required.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, most welcome, Manvi. It was a pleasure to be here.